I got so much confidence from learning how to write and express myself. And that's what I think education should be. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has intelligence. And how do you figure out the life that is most meaningful to you?
We recognize genius wherever it exists. And if you're known by the company you keep, we are proud to not only spotlight the women that are part of Rockefeller Capital Management's unique network, but also welcome our brilliant audience members.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Esposito, head of Rockefeller's Enterprise Client Coverage Group, and welcome back to Genius Loves Company. Everyone has a story to tell, and we're excited to hear those from some of Rockefeller's top private advisors, investors, and senior leaders about the life and career experiences that got them here and the insights and perspective they've gained along the way. With me today is Valerie Rockefeller, an environmentalist, educator, and proponent of social justice philanthropy, and great-great-granddaughter of John D. Rockefeller, putting her in the fifth generation of the Rockefeller family. Among many civic and philanthropic activities, Valerie is a longtime member and current board chair of Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, one of the world's largest philanthropic services organizations. RPA has facilitated more than $4 billion in grant making to more than 70 countries and currently advises individuals, families, foundations, and corporations on more than $500 million in annual giving on a global basis. Suffice it to say, RPA helps set the gold standard for philanthropy around the world. This is such a treat for me, Valerie. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Laura. It's great to see you again, and I'm very excited to have this opportunity. I'm obsessed with podcast listening myself, of course, especially Genius Loves Company. And so I'm really honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for liking and following. I know that your episode will be quite popular, I'm sure. Where do we start? I often like to start logically at the beginning. And when I think about you, Valerie, I've been really struck by how open you've been about a few things, including growing up in West Virginia, being the daughter of U.S. Senator Jay Rockefeller, and how conflicted you felt bearing a famous name. Can you tell us a little about the early part of your journey and how you came to terms with being a Rockefeller?
Yes, thank you for that question. And I'm a very linear thinker myself, so I appreciate that direction. So growing up in West Virginia was a great experience because it was a place where there was a lot of freedom. I have 14, 16, and 18-year-old kids now, and they're just under much more pressure than I was growing up. The pressure I was under, however, is being a Rockefeller it's a heavy thing in some ways, obviously. I hope I'm going to put my privilege out there. Yeah. It's not really a burden to be born with money and opportunity and connections and all the privilege that comes along with being white and connected and healthy and all those things, right? So That being said, it was a little awkward sometimes, I'd say, socially, and also made me very aware from a young age of the power of money. Because in West Virginia, there's not a lot of money. There aren't any other Rockefellers. And so even though my father was in politics, and I mostly affiliated that way with you're the governor's daughter, I also was somewhat aware of being a Rockefeller. It wasn't until I moved to New York in 1996. That's when I really began connecting with the Rockefeller family more. And I will say up front, the opportunities I've had, like this, and to serve on Rockefeller family affiliated nonprofits. Obviously, I serve on the boards of other nonprofits and work with them as well. But really most of my time since the birth of my 18-year-old has been with family nonprofit work. And it is just such an honor to do that because there's such a focus on climate, which came a little bit later in my life, and the opportunity I have for the sort of integration with the rest of the Rockefeller family, because so many people are focused on the environment, and to really learn about philanthropic excellence. Because what really my passion has become is sustainability in terms of what are we leaving for future generations. Yes, that means I want to leave my kids some money so they have the opportunities that I've got. and that, Rockefellers have been privileged to serve.
Right.
It really was a blessing to be able to be a classroom teacher, but still be able to afford to live in Manhattan with my little brother, especially because my parents paid half our rent as long as we lived together. My brother Charles, also a client and active in the Rockefeller family nonprofit world. And so I just feel really lucky coming from West Virginia, where my perspective was very narrow in the sense that we were all about politics. And my awareness of the environment was really limited, to now where I'm able to work with global institutions and honor the Rockefeller legacy in a different way through the nonprofits and through the other family-affiliated organizations. I just feel really fortunate.
And when you think back to growing up in West Virginia, was it always just kind of innate? Because as I'm processing what you're saying, not only did you have the Rockefeller name, but you also had the political power, if you will. Your father having been governor, being a senator, that's a lot for a child to kind of understand. Did your parents talk to you and your siblings about it? How did you come to kind of appreciate that dynamic that is incredibly unique? One in and of itself would be unique. Both just seems like completely anomalous.
Well, politics is interesting because it's the double-edged sword of exposure. You think I've had opportunities through my parents and through others to meet global philanthropists and all that. In West Virginia, and especially when you're campaigning in an odd way, you're actually meeting with people who need government services and who serve the government mainly. So you go to flood sites, you go to VA centers, you go to hospitals. I've been to some pretty intense emergency.
With your parents?
Yes, because it's an odd thing because, right, it's a campaign.
Right.
So sometimes it's exposure that way. You have to look like the perfect family. But even between campaigns, that's when you're sort of recording it. That's kind of what we did on weekends. We either went to our farm in Pocahontas County, which literally didn't even have a stoplight in the town. It was so small. Or we went around and met with a lot of real people. And so you see real human suffering and real human potential. So it's not a glamorous life in any way.
Yeah.
I love politics. It is my hobby. I financially support politicians I agree with, especially who are promoting, responsible climate policies and public education reform. What I saw growing up was more how brutal it is to lose campaigns. Because my father did lose by the widest margin in West Virginia history. People expected him to go back to New York. He didn't. He stayed. We moved to a town of 3,000 people. And then he ran again in 4 years. And then he won.
Wow.
And so we were in parades where we were booed. There was teasing at school. It's mixed in ways.
Sure.
So these incredible opportunities. I got to meet Jimmy Carter, was like the best thing that ever happened in my entire life. He actually came to West Virginia. So it was a very real existence and a very superficial existence in some ways because, you live with state troopers, drive you everywhere and with you all the time, and you see yourself in campaign commercials, and it all feels very weird. And a great
surreal.
bonus of that was I was so close to my three brothers because we spent so much time together. And it's an experience my kids have had because they've had, I have a really small house and they do similar sports. So they end up interacting with each other a lot. And my oldest daughter does a lot of the driving. So, they get time together, but it's not the same way. It's not like you're surrounded by adults and then it's just
and
you.
on a public stage.
Right.
Right? Yeah, that was very kind of unique to you and your siblings.
And I also think that there's a difference being a woman in that to launch right into the gender piece of all this.
Yeah.
There just are expectations of behavior and whatever of girls that I also very keenly felt.
Elaborate on that.
It's interesting. My mother is a total feminist. Like literally Gloria Steinem once said, your mother is like the hero of this, right?
Oh my God.
Of this movement, which is of course not entirely true. She was one of the very, very many heroines.
Sure.
But she used her access to go to Capitol Hill and try to pass the ERA. And she's been the CEO of a WETA, a public education, public media station in Washington for over 30 years. She is a total rock star. And her father was a politician though too. She spent her entire life campaigning.
Yeah.
And so that is that same thing of you're being a leader all the time.
Right.
You're also always supporting your dad or your husband. And so that was the model I had of, yes, be strong and pursue what you're interested in. But when it comes down to it, your interests are generally going to be subsumed, under the sort of presentation thing. And so for me, a lot of the liberation in moving to New York was being, who cares? There are a million Rockefellers here. Not actually. There are actually only 300 something of us. And a lot are outside of New York, of course. But moving here and then seeing, I came here to go to teachers college, and then seeing, Rockefeller Center, and had a totally different idea of what it meant to be a Rockefeller. It had nothing to do with politics anymore at that point.
Right.
It was more around philanthropy and business, which are not things I'd really grown up with very much.
So you make this decision, come to New York. Had you ever contemplated, because it does sound like you're still very involved, at least from a hobby perspective, maybe not your day job perspective, in politics. Had you ever thought at any stage, I too want to follow in my father's footsteps, pursue something in and around government position? And how did you switch paths to focus more on education?
I am a socially awkward introvert. I never for one moment considered going into politics. But I loved interning in my dad's office. And my first job out of college, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, tutoring. And
where did that stem from?
Well, this comes back to West Virginia. Growing up, we lived in Charleston, which is, coal country, but we did live in the capital city, and we had gone to elementary school. We lived in the South Hills, which is weird how these geographical things play out. The Hills is a little more privileged than the Hollers, because of flooding and whatever. And also when we lived near this town called Nitro, you could smell the chemicals coming down the valley. You did not want to be in the bottom of the valley necessarily. And that's where the coal barges were, and the train tracks with the coal coming through. Everything was about coal there.
Sure.
And so even though we were in the best public schools in Charleston, I wasn't that well educated. And I mean, like creationism, no sex ed, like that kind of stuff. Didn't really have homework so much. Then when we moved to Washington, when my father was elected to the Senate, I went to a private school for the first time in my life. And that was complete shock on every level. I was really far behind, not only socially, but academically. And I just had to grind it out for 4 years, really, to be prepared for college. So that put in my mind an acute sense of inequity is a pretty powerful thing. Like if I've had a hard time adjusting to an intense academic environment in the big city.
Despite your last name, despite your parents
my
playing
parents
this role.
Are from Chicago and New York. And, and I had a little bit of a West Virginia accent, which I lost very quickly after I moved to DC. Despite all that, I felt pretty overwhelmed. And so that the way to make change is going to be through education. In high school, I volunteered at a nursing home. Yeah. And then I thought, okay, I'll try kids. Let's do something different when I was in college. And then I totally fell in love with tutoring. So I knew I wanted to be a teacher, which is a roundabout way of saying, though I had volunteered on the Clinton campaign. And so I was able to get a job at the U.S. Department of Education. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go straight to the classroom. But my best friend from high school, who was also on the Clinton campaign, she convinced me, just come do this for a few years. You can just defer grad school. And I did end up working in Washington for 3 years, and then loved that because I saw policy, and it was very exciting in terms of the possibilities around equality in education and a lot of the student loan stuff that was happening then, trying to cut the middlemen out of that. I was just really excited about the Clinton policy stuff. And I realized I never wanted to work in an office again. So there is no better office, I'm sure, other than RCM,
of course,
than the U.S. Department of Education, because it was Dick Riley was the secretary, was just the most gracious, wonderful person. And my boss in his office was a senior advisor on teaching, a woman named Terry Dozier, who was the first teacher to ever serve in a senior position at the U.S. Department of Education, which is incredibly ironic. And she's still a mentor for me. But imagine having literally the National Teacher of the Year as your boss. And so you do not get a better office situation.
No.
Even so, I was like, can't wait to get back in the classroom.
Wow.
so was
you
my
lasted 3 years.
So I lasted 3 years.
Then went to grad school.
And then I went to grad school at Teachers College here in New York.
Okay.
And where I'm still on the board and deeply engaged. And then from that, I got my first teaching job. And so I didn't leave the classroom until I had my first child.
Wow.
How it ties together in a way that's interesting is I still wasn't very aware of Rockefeller stuff. I mean, my students, my nickname was Downtown, which is not very respectful, but they'd only heard of Rockefeller Center. They'd seen it. I taught in East Harlem as a subway stop. Yeah. They hadn't even been on the subway going south, most of the students. And then I found out the woman teaching in a classroom next to me had been a minority educators fellow.
You're kidding me.
And she just told me. I didn't even know that existed. But so I thought, this is crazy. I was able to pay for my own grad school education. And she
Here's
got
someone
this
who
fellowship.
benefited from this, my family's fellowship.
Exactly. And then she was my colleague, and she was a better teacher than I was by far, by the way. So that's when I first became aware of some of the work. And then one of my father's first cousins, Stephen Rockefeller, reached out to me about Spelman College, because the Rockefeller family is inclusive in lots of ways, and thought, there's a tradition. Again, I'm a huge beneficiary of nepotism. Yep. I have always told my kids, you get opportunities. Most people work and work and work, and they may be rewarded for it or maybe not. In my experience, I get the opportunity, and then I scramble to try to prove that I'm worthy of it.
Yeah.
And so I did have this insane opportunity as someone in my late 20s to go on the Spelman College Board. In the pride I had, John D. Rockefeller Sr., mainly known for his business acumen, which I respect, maybe not all of his practices, but in general, I think we're all here because we are grateful for and respect what he did.
Absolutely.
But he married into a family of abolitionists. And so in tribute to his family and his wife and her sister, who were both very ardent abolitionists and educators, he put some of the money into Spelman College. He founded the endowment and then just kept giving more money over the years. And so this long tradition with Spelman is incredible, and is one of the reasons I also am so grateful that Rockefeller Capital Management has a Rockefeller Spelman program.
Right.
And my colleague happened to be a woman of color. RCM is doing it too, and that KJ Kirkland is now working here. And I know there have been other summer associates as well, but that she's now on the alternatives team full-time is just incredible. I mean, that tradition of focusing on education, excellence, opportunity. I really learned from the best at Spelman what education can look like, and what making the most of very few dollars. HBCUs are somewhat better funded now, and there have been some major gifts which have been great.
Sure.
But there's so much more we can be doing to promote equity and excellence.
It really strikes me that it's in the DNA. What today, from an education perspective, how are you and your family understand the great work that you're doing with HBCUs? What are some of the other impacts that you're trying to have from an education perspective, and maybe shift to the environment?
And so I think I'm the person who's probably still most focused on education, and that has been through high quality public charter school networks. That's how I spend most of my time in education. And the way that I think there's intersection with the family work is there's much more focus on place-based or environmental education, but also climate education, because talk about economic development opportunities and the green job explosion.
Yeah.
And also just to make schools healthier places. They're, electrifying school buses. You think of kids with asthma, as all three of my kids have.
Yeah.
And so, imagine living in a city and getting on a diesel school bus every single day, which a lot of kids are doing.
Absolutely.
The air's worse inside the bus than outside. There are things we can do in policy and at a large scale that will encourage schools to become greener places, community centers, that kind of work. And then again, the focus on mental health, emotional well-being as a legitimate way of spending your time and learning those skills in school. I think also is something that the family has long been interested in, is a comprehensive approach, like an ecosystem approach. So you have to live a life of integrity and health. And then that helps you become someone who can help create that type of philanthropic ecosystem.
Yeah, properly give back.
Give back. And in a way that is really meaningful to you, which is what makes it sustainable. One other way that we're working on education is great, because it's having clients/donors figure out how to live according to their values and how to best deploy their resources to do so. And one of the things I love about chairing RPA is that we do so many different things. And so I've learned about a lot of other issues. I can get a little too tunnel vision, I think, around education and climate, and the fact that we're so global and that we are following donors and supporting donors' goals has been really interesting. Obviously, there's a ton in climate too. We do a lot around financial inclusion. We work a lot in Africa. We do a lot around women's rights, around indigenous rights and voice. And the way that plays out is working with family foundations or individuals or sponsored projects. So sometimes the best service we can provide is if there's a group that wants to do something and they don't want to file for nonprofit status, we support those sponsored projects and help them. We help them with DEI training. We help them with management, learn to manage finances, so that these often young leaders, they can do what they're passionate about, regenerative agriculture, whatever it is, oceans work, or working on how do you rebuild, do more outreach from museums in a way that's more inclusive of the community where they're based. Whatever they want to do, we support them with the back office piece so they can really focus on that work. It's just really, it's interesting. It's interesting from a management point of view too. And we're very fortunate to have a new CEO. We had an incredible founding president and CEO, Melissa Berman, who was extraordinary and made RPA what it is today. And as of March 1st, we have a CEO named LaTanya Mapp, who came from the Global Fund for Women, which she really grew and which also did sponsored projects. And she wrote a book called The Everyday Feminist, perfect for this audience. Go out. And she had run Planned Parenthood Global, and she worked for USAID and UNICEF, just incredible leader and lawyer and diplomat. So we needed another leader like Melissa. By the way, we don't have a mandate that it has to be a woman, but bonus.
Bonus
how
it has
it's worked out both times. But in fact, women have been chairing the boards and have been very active in the family. And Abby Aldrich Rockefeller is, my oldest daughter's middle name is hers. And because she was such the matriarch and such a promoter of respect for individuals and civil rights and such a great mother, and everything she did with love, high standards.
Yeah.
In a way that was really in a lack of self-consciousness and a sense of joy that was really wonderful. And there have been primarily women chairs of the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. So even though the names are sort of intimidating and maybe a little like patriarchal or something sounding.
It's more modern when you actually look through.
Yes, I think women's leadership has been important in these organizations.
That's extraordinary. Do you think your children will get involved?
I hope so.
Yeah,
I definitely hope so.
Yeah.
I've learned the way to have them lose interest in something is to be too pedantic about it. But
Right.
I definitely talk about what I'm doing.
So when you think about, because I want to go back to something you said about sustainable investing, that you've gotten more focused around that as you've been crystallizing views on climate change, the role for capital investments to help facilitate changes and truly have an impact. Is that a view you've long held? Is that a view you've come to now hold?
I'm 53. I don't think I thought about it all until I was probably in my mid-30s.
Okay.
And in a really annoying way, I think I was pretty self-righteous about, I don't talk about money, which is something rich people can say, right?
Yeah.
I now realize that. And I think I also had shame around it. Probably from growing up in West Virginia, too, where we didn't know anyone else who had a lot of money.
Yeah.
And
that's just the human condition, right?
Right. Right. I don't want to say I'm so exceptional to have issues. Money is complicated for everyone. And what I have really come to believe is that it is a resource and it is values neutral. And how are you going to use it?
Yeah.
And you have to know about it to use it most effectively.
Did your parents talk to you about it?
Never. No. And that's, maybe that's generational. I don't know. But it has made my brothers and me very determined to think about how we spend and invest our money.
Right.
And also to be more open with our kids about it so it doesn't become some loaded issue.
Yeah. That nobody wants to talk about.
That nobody wants to talk about. And also to say this is what you can afford to do and maybe this is what you can afford to do.
Right.
And by the way, my kids love babysitting, camp counseling, lifeguarding. I used to, of course, have these internships at the UN and on Capitol Hill. My kids want to make money. And they do a lot of sports. And so they can't do that much else in the summer. Yeah. So they've had a very sort of quote unquote normal, I guess, upbringing in that way. But it's made them much more aware of money than I ever was too.
Yeah. They sound like they're pretty kind of industrious and entrepreneurial as a result as well.
Totally. Right. So I'll be fascinated to see what they do with that.
Yeah.
But when I became aware of money more, I think I was always philanthropic and never a huge spender. And at the same time, think about the impact of the money that you're spending and try to do it in a way in the terms of the products you buy, the little ways we live.
Right. So that's a great segue. When it comes to high net worth families, and when I think about our families that we work with, there are differing views about when money and the issues that it raises should be discussed with children. At Rockefeller, we offer, and the Rockefeller family has been actually beneficiaries. Many of Rockefeller family members have been beneficiaries of this. We offer financial education for our clients on a multi-generational basis. So what's your advice, Valerie, for today's parents around talking to your children and messaging money to your children?
I would try to talk about it with as light a touch as possible, just sort of in that way of just talking through what you're thinking and doing, that sort of modeling piece of it, and saying, this is probably too expensive. I don't really want this. I'll think about it for a couple days. Or thinking about, do I want this or do I need this? I think just talking through is often helpful with children and is a kind of transparency, and it doesn't put the pressure on them too much.
Yeah.
And so I also think with my kids, fortunately, do like working, and that does teach you the value of money, especially if you're just like babysitting or camp counseling or something, which doesn't pay very much. It does make them aware of the prices of things. But so again, to just talk about what you're doing and the choices you're making. And then when they make choices, just support them and ask them what their thinking is.
Right. Absolutely. That's very good advice. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self just starting out on the road of life?
There is something about paying attention. It's sort of like money. Time is a resource, and you can use it in ways that benefit others and yourself, or in ways where you are just getting caught up in things that aren't important.
Sure.
The way that you're going to show love is just to pay attention. I find that enormously relieving and meaningful. I was a special education teacher, and so much the joy of that is your class is half the size. And so the goal is there's an individualized education program for each kid. And you are supposed to be following their lead and figuring out how you can accommodate them and help them learn. But you realize, especially with children, but with everybody, all you have to do is sit and listen and be supportive to really connect with somebody, and then try to be true to yourself. I've also found that for myself, when I tend to get anxious, the way to bring that down is just to remind myself, none of this is about you. Just look at what's happening around you and just appreciate what's good and accept in yourself and around you what you're not going to be able to change, and just try to notice things that are meaningful. Oh, there's another good one I heard recently, which was that like really being aware is not rigid, but it's precise. And that's really good for me, who can get a little overly rules focused. It's no shock. I'm a special ed teacher. I like a lot of structure. But it doesn't mean that you make a decision and stick with it. Like, I'm going to be mindful right now. It is just, I'm just going to pay attention to one thing. You know, that precision rather than rigidity. I think that's great.
I love that. I haven't heard that before. Okay, so master's degrees from Columbia University Teachers College and Bank Street. And we've talked a lot about being a trustee at Spelman College and how meaningful that has been to you, Valerie. Did the stint in the U.S. Education Department. That's really where it kind of all started. It's a key focus in so many of your endeavors. Can you share why and how education became so important to you?
Education became important to me because I saw growing up in West Virginia, for example, with special education. At that time in my junior high school, the special ed students spent most of their day cleaning the cafeteria, honestly. And then realizing the untapped potential there and just the inhumanity and how is your life trajectory going to be changed. I found for myself, it was after we moved to Washington, D.C., when my father was elected to the Senate, and I switched to much better schools, frankly, that I saw how hard it is and how important it was to me. I mean, partially because I'm a little teacher's pet and I wanted to please my teachers. That is definitely part of it too. But I got so much confidence from learning how to write and express myself. And that's what I think education should be. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has intelligence. And just how do you figure out the life that is most meaningful to you, that is true to you? And I think it does take equitable education for us to realize our potential as a society. And I just saw that in my own life, my own different education experiences.
I'm getting kind of shreds of you talking a lot about intentionality. Have you kind of evolved in terms of living your life with more intentionality? Is that something you think about?
And I think, again, you're supposed to start with yourself, right?
Right.
I've never been capable of that. I learned, good grant making is when you have a strategy and then you're intentionally inclusive in finding not the usual suspects, like finding the people on the front lines who are really doing that work, right? And then intentionality in your own life is going to be, I want to achieve this goal, or intentionality. And then how do I plan backwards from that? That's what you learn in teaching. What's the outcome you're seeking? And then plan backwards. I think for myself, I've only known when I've made bad decisions, when I'm like, I'm not really in the mood to do this. Or, darn, why am I spending my time with a little bit of a knot in my stomach? Because this is not really me. Just because I can do these things doesn't mean I should be doing these things. I usually realize in retrospect what made me when I was being true to myself or not. So I've just been very fortunate to get a lot of do-overs and have a lot of really loving, honest people in my life. But I do like a plan. And even if it's going to change, I think you have to have an intention when you're setting out, and then have that be the draw, the gravity, but then be willing to step away from that, and even if it's going to take some hard conversations to redirect, but to be constantly paying attention to yourself, what's working, what's not, what am I good at, what am I not?
I love that.
And where also, by the way, I think a lot of women think that we always need to be responsible for everything, and then just to say to yourself, hey, there are usually other people who are better at this than I am. And B, there are other people who want this leadership opportunity.
Yeah.
The martyr thing is just so not productive.
It's not at all.
And so it's really what you should be doing is creating space for other people to reach their potential.
I picked up on what you're talking about in terms of pivoting and course correcting. And I always go back to the adage of plans are useless, but the planning itself is actually indispensable.
Yes, it's all about the process.
Exactly.
Yes,
it's all about the process.
Very meditative, Laura.
That.
Nice.
Wow. Who knew?
That
was not intentional.
Then it's just you. I'm impressed. Naturally mindful.
Valerie, this has been such a treat to get to spend this time with you. Thank you so much. One question we always like to ask all of our guests: where can we find Valerie Rockefeller 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning?
Thank you, Laura. This has been a pleasure. Also, I'm an extremely literal person, so I'm going to tell you where I was at 10 a.m. past Saturday, which is, so my kids are all rowers, which means lots of early mornings, including Saturday mornings. They have practice from 6:30 to 9:30. And by the way, when they say practice starts at 6:30, that means you have to be there at 6. And so they go out to breakfast afterwards. And normally my 18-year-old does all the driving, but she does get to go out to breakfast with her friends, not her younger siblings' friends on Saturdays. So I'm usually picking them up from breakfast with their friends on Saturday morning.
You're not invited to the breakfast?
Oh my God. Then I'd have to do the practice, and I do not care to sweat. So thank you.
So then that is the perfect Saturday morning for you.
Perfect Saturday morning.
Brilliant. Valerie, this has been such a treat. I can't wait for all of our Genius Loves Company listeners to be able to listen to this. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Genius Loves Company. To learn more about Rockefeller Capital Management, visit rockco.com or keep up with us on LinkedIn or Instagram. This material was prepared by Rockefeller Capital Management. The views expressed of the hosts and guests in this episode are as of a particular point in time and are subject to change without notice. The views expressed by the speakers are solely their own and may differ from or conflict with those of other divisions in Rockefeller Capital Management. This information was provided for illustrative and educational purposes only. It should not be construed as an investment recommendation, investment advice, an offer of Rockefeller investment advisory or brokerage services, or a projection or illustration of the performance of any particular investment or strategy offered by Rockefeller. Forward-looking statements, including those presented herein, are inherently uncertain, as future events may differ materially from those reflected, and past performance is not a guarantee of future performance.